Is Rob Gronkowski unretiring? Might a Patriots return be in the works? Plus, Mike Vrabel gets chatty with the media. All of that and more here on Patscast.
Gronk, come back one more time. Strap him up, let's watch him shine. Red zone beast still breaking.
Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Good to be with you. You know, Tom Brady, if I woke up tomorrow morning, pulled up my Twitter, and found out that Tom Brady was unretiring and returning to the NFL, it would not really surprise me, right? He's already done it once. You know, Brett Favre did it 3 or 4 times. Brady certainly has that itch. Would not be a shocker. That said, Rob Gronkowski, I did not expect that. And there are some rumors swirling today, according to Cecil Lammey from DenverSports.com. He says, quote, "League sources tell me 4-time Super Bowl champion tight end Rob Gronkowski is considering a return to the NFL. He worked with Sean Payton at Fox, and I'm told he loves Denver and QB Bo Nix. Also, 2 of his brothers, Dan and Chris, had short stints with the team." Now, this is a Denver reporter, so he's really pushing the Broncos thing, but I think a lot of that has to do with where Rob Gronkowski is currently working out. He added, "Sources tell me Gronkowski has been working out in Vail." Vail is the expensive mountain town in the heart of the mountains in Colorado. He's been working out in Vail this offseason as he wants to physically be ready for another NFL season. High-altitude training in the offseason could help him prepare for the rigors of training camp if a team shows interest. And not surprisingly, Gronk is working on his conditioning, which is probably the most important thing if he wants to unretire after 4 years in the NFL. Again, this reporter heavily pushing the Denver Broncos thing. Seems a bit odd to me that Gronk, if he did want to unretire, would want to play in Denver, the team that he despised, at least from 2013 through 2015, that beat the Patriots when they were on the road in the AFC Championship game. I just don't know. Sean Payton is a tough coach. We know Gronk wanted to be with a more friendly coach. That's part of the reason he initially left the Patriots, took a year off before going to Tampa. I don't know. Peyton, Gronk, maybe they would mesh well. But Denver Gronk wants to get a stake at Copper Mountain during the winter. That's what's going on here. It's not necessarily that if he wants to unretire, he's firm on playing for the Broncos. If I had to guess, just an educated guess. But you have to think if Gronk is considering a return, and these rumors are true, according to Cecil Lammey, if they are correct, the Patriots would have to be high on his list, right? I mean, Gronk, we saw it after the hire. He spoke very highly of Mike Vrabel, has spoken very highly of Drake May. Obviously, very familiar with Josh McDaniels and the offense there, would be able to pick it up right away on day one without a huge learning curve that he would probably have at other organizations, even the Tampa Bay Bucks, that has kind of evolved. They've had some turnover with the offensive coordinators and did this past year too. And of course, there's the connection to the organization. Gronk and the Patriots fans, it seems like a good fit. You would think if Gronk is serious about this, his conditioning and all of that, if he wants to come to a team, the Patriots have to be in the top 3, top 5, and maybe at the very top of his list. So, I don't know. Again, this is just a report that came out today. Tons of people are running with it. Not sure, but if it is true, think of the fit of Gronk returning to the Patriots. Presumably, they wouldn't bring Austin Hooper back if that were the case. Definitely been advocating for the Pats to re-sign Austin Hooper. You know, he was a very effective receiving tight end this past year. You don't have to pay him much. Would love for him to come back if this Gronk thing isn't real, but if it is real and he's considering the Patriots, you know, they should bring him in. I don't think you'd have to pay Gronk a ton of money. You'd have to pay him a little bit, but not a ton. And think of what Josh McDaniels could do pairing him alongside Hunter Henry. He would have a field day out there with Hunter Henry and Rob Gronkowski. Plus, you're adding a tight end who can block, a rarity these days, but can also be your most impactful receiver on the field. This is why I'm really tired of the Travis Kelce comparison. That's what makes Gronk great. Travis Kelce is basically a large wide receiver, right? He is not, his blocking ability, as we saw in the Super Bowl, he could not handle those edge rushers from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a wide receiver. Gronk can handle that sort of thing. He can block, he can be an old school tight end, but he can also be the Patriots' number one wide receiver, which if he came to the team right now, perhaps he would be. And that also might take the pressure off of the Patriots to add a number one wide receiver this offseason if you were to bring in a player like Gronk. New England didn't really have one during the Gronk years. Yeah, they had Edelman. I guess you could consider him their number one wide receiver, but Edelman's a slot guy. You know, Demario Douglas, I think, can be that guy to a lesser extent. But they didn't really have that big-bodied boundary X wide receiver that we always talk about with Gronk there. The Randy Moss was gone when I believe he was gone when Gronk was drafted, and they just had a committee of pretty solid wide receivers. And that's how Brady and McDaniels were able to make it work with all those years, and it certainly helped that you had the best tight end in the history of the NFL out there. He changes a lot of things and maybe takes the pressure off of the Patriots front office and Mike Vrabel this offseason in terms of going out there and having to pay a lot of money for a big number one wide receiver. You could just spend the offseason taking care of the offensive line and then, add a piece at wide receiver. You add Gronk and then trade for a Cooper Kupp or someone that's not going to cost you too much. And then just let Josh McDaniels go to work. I love the idea. And you'll have time to develop and bring in a true number one wide receiver. Maybe you take a guy in the second or third round who could eventually become that guy. Who knows? But adding a guy like Gronk just changes everything, of course. Not to mention the mentorship of the young guys. The Patriots, they have Jaheim Bell on the roster. He was one of their late round picks this past year, plays the tight end position. Started to get a lot more playing time toward the end of the season this past year. You would expect him to be able to make a big leap in year two, and having a guy like Rob Gronkowski in the locker room is really going to help with that. In the tight ends room, I think Jaheim Bell could really use a mentor like that. Not to mention, this is also a very tight end heavy draft. Everyone talks about how weak this draft is. Yes, it's weak in terms of blue chip players. You have Abdul Carter, you have Travis Hunter, and then an enormous drop off to the tier 2 players. But tier 2, tier 3 players, they have a lot of really good tight ends in there. And you might be able to get a guy somewhere in the middle rounds, and Gronk can be the bridge to that next great Patriots tight end alongside Hunter Henry. I mean, it's not a bad idea. The question is, will Gronk be the same player at 35 coming off of 4 years of zero football? There will be a drop-off for sure, but I do not think it'll be as dramatic as some think it will be. What was the biggest issue during Gronk's career? It was the daily grind of the NFL that accumulated year after year, and the injuries they led to that Gronk never was able to really fully recover from. He always complained about lingering injury issues in the latter half of his career. Most of his career. I mean, he entered the NFL. The reason he slipped to the Patriots and they drafted him where they did is because he had all sorts of injury issues in college. He was basically a workhorse at the University of Arizona and did all the Bill Belichick drills for however many years in New England, and he just got worn out. Well, now he's had 4 years to fully heal. Yeah, I know he slimmed down a little bit, but he didn't pork up or anything, and I don't think he'd have any trouble putting on weight or muscle this offseason. I mean, Gronk still looks like he's in great shape, and adding 10 pounds of muscle, like he's done that many times in his career. I'm sure he could do it again. And Mike Vrabel will manage his workload a little bit differently than Bill Belichick did, particularly at Gronk's age. I think that was Gronk's biggest issue with Belichick, is he worked him like he was a third-year veteran player when clearly he was breaking down at times. There's going to be workload management there with a guy like Mike Vrabel, who I know is understood as a tough coach, but he is an empathetic coach and an understanding coach, and he's the kind of guy that when you have the greatest tight end of all time, if you're lucky enough that Gronk unretires and comes to the team, like, he's going to cater to him a little bit more and give him the respect that a 35-year-old veteran like Gronk, the greatest to ever play the position, ultimately deserves. So, I don't know. It's a crazy idea. Again, if this had happened with Tom Brady, I'd be like, it's cool. not really surprising. Gronk is a bit surprising, so we'll see if there's actually some smoke here. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Gronk is serious about this? Do you buy this report? Do you think we could see him on an NFL field next season? And do you think the Patriots would be at the top of his list? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to hear from you. But speaking of Mike Vrabel, the NFL Scouting Combine started this week. Really, it truly is the most wonderful time of the year. I all my decorations are out. Love the NFL Scouting Combine. It really doesn't start to pick up until later this week, but Mike Vrabel is on site, and Elliot Wolf, I guess, will be speaking to reporters tomorrow, but Mike Vrabel had a ton of interviews today in various places. He had a press conference. He was on Sirius XM. He did something with the Patriots. He did something that I picked up from CLNS Media, so probably with a bunch of Boston reporters. Really nice to hear from Vrabel. And was there any gaffes in there like Gerard Mayo that's going to become a 3-week headline that happened week after week last season? No, none of that happened with Mike Vrabel's interviews today, but there were a few nuggets in there that I think are worth mentioning that are pretty important and will show how it will impact how this team evolves in the weeks and months heading into free agency and the NFL draft, and also how the front office really evolves. So Vrabel was asked about free agency, and the Patriots, we know they have the most cap space in the NFL. He was asked about just spending money in free agency, which the Patriots really haven't done, at least since 2021. He said, quote, "I like to shop like everybody else. And so when you go and there's only one of a certain car, maybe you have to pay a little bit more for that one car because there's only one of them. When you start to get into a range where you feel like there's an area where players are comparable and you like 3 or 4 players in a certain area for a certain role, you may not have to overspend, but it's free agency. I think that everybody overspends sometimes in free agency." So a basic supply and demand lesson there from Mike Vrabel, but this is exactly what you want to hear if you're a New England Patriots fan. They had all the cap space in the world last offseason, and they didn't really spend much of it at all, and we saw the results this year. Alongside the poor coaching, the Patriots should be able, with a different front office strategy and a real head coach this year, even if it's the same roster and they don't do anything this offseason, they should be able to improve by leaps and bounds, and it's really great to hear that Vrabel is willing to spend a ton of money this offseason. There's one great left tackle on the market in free agency, and that's Ronnie Stanley. Overpay and go get him. Of course, Baltimore's GM today said they are confident they can work out a long-term deal, so we'll see. Maybe that Jackson guy with the LA Rams, I don't think he's as good as Ronnie Stanley, but he seems to be the next guy. But Stanley, start floating out the idea now in the media. The Patriots are willing to spend $30 million a year on Ronnie Stanley. Let him know that. Let him put up the rabbit ears so he's willing to go into free agency and not work out this deal with Baltimore. I think that's a good idea. There's one great receiver on the market. Supply and demand. T. Higgins. Overpay to get him. Now, we heard last week that Cincinnati, they want to tag him. They reiterated this week that they're working. Their preference, that's what they said, their preference is working toward a long-term deal with Higgins, but that rumor seems to have tempered quite a bit the last few days, particularly as they talk glowingly about Jamar Chase and making him the highest paid receiver in football. You know T. Higgins doesn't want to hear that. Yeah, and he likes Jamar Chase. He wants him to get his dough, if you will, but T. Higgins, he wants to get paid too, and he can get upwards of $30+ million this offseason and make him a top 5, top 6 or 7 paid NFL wide receiver. And yeah, you can say he's not a top 6 or 7 NFL wide receiver, but he's probably top 15. And the way the market goes, Jamar Chase is going to be paid, in my opinion, at least $40 million a year when he finally gets that long-term deal with the Bengals. We've heard the salary cap's going to go up even more next year. So, you know, T. Higgins, they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Hendrickson, who still has a year left on his contract. They can't afford to pay all those guys, and Cincinnati is been cheap. Float out the idea. Same with Ronnie Stanley. Patriots were willing to pay $35 million. Make sure he doesn't get that long-term deal, and incentivize Cincinnati not to waste their franchise tag on a player good news. Glad to hear that from Mike Vrabel. Hopefully the Patriots are willing to spend. As a Red Sox fan, this has been the biggest frustration. They're significantly worse than the Patriots when it comes to spending, but they finally spent on Alex Bregman, and there's some buzz around the team. Bringing in T. Higgins, bringing in Ronnie Stanley. Who cares if you're using a third of your salary cap on those two players alone? Those are major positions of need, major holes. Go ahead and do it, and it looks like Mike Vrabel is thinking about that. And he's also thinking about getting a number one wide receiver. That is important to him. That's something that he also mentioned today, which is important. Another question that Mike Vrabel was asked, will he have full control, the final say over the roster? We still don't have full clarity on that, by the way. If Mike Vrabel is fully in charge, despite some ambiguous reports that he is. Adam Schefter was asked about it, shortly after Mike Vrabel was hired, and he was asked, does Mike Vrabel have total control? And Schefter responded, he's the guy. Schefter was asked to clarify, and he responded, he's the guy. I need a little bit more specifics than that. Is he the Big Lebowski? That's the dude. That's not the guy. I know. But is he calling the shots? Is Mike Vrabel the guy who has the final call? Not the guy who has the last call and ultimately determines what happens on that roster. Well, he had a clarifying quote on that today saying, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have wanted to be the head coach here if I wasn't comfortable in my impact on the roster. So sounds like he's the guy. Again, I don't know what that means, but he's the guy. We know that. I think he's ultimately has total control, but he did continue here talking a little bit about collaboration, which was the buzzword during Gerard Mayo's lone season with the Patriots. He said, we want to continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching. We're all just trying to find ways to bring the right players in here. Now, Stretch is John Stryker, basically Mike Vrabel's go-to guy, his Ernie Adams, his right-hand man, the guy that he wanted to bring to New England. But notice who he didn't mention there. I'll read it again. We want to continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching. He didn't mention Elliott Wolf. Remember the introductory press conference 6 weeks ago? It was all about Elliott Wolf. Mike Vrabel could not stop mentioning Elliott Wolf. Elliott and I were just chatting about that in the back room. Yeah, Elliott and I, we had a chuckle. We want to draft good players. We shared a nice chuckle. We had a beer after we met. None of that today. And maybe there was some mention of Elliott somewhere, but we want to continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching. There's two guys in the front office that really have control that we know of. And that's Mike Vrabel. He's the guy, whatever that means. And there's John Stryker. I don't think Elliott Wolf is part of that anymore. Yeah, he's weighing in. He's part of that decision-making. There's continuity there because he was the de facto GM for the Patriots this past year. And maybe Vrabel was just glossed over naming more names. But if Elliott is not top of mind when he's listing that out, that is a real sign. He may be either slowly being pushed out, as some have suggested, you keep the continuity there till after the draft and then you completely reorganize the front office, or at the very least, he's becoming less influential there. So that is an interesting nugget, and something that I think Patriots fans are thrilled to hear, because Elliott Wolf, other than Drake May, who fell in his lap, who did he draft last year that you're really encouraged about? Jalen Polk? Certainly not. Javon Baker? Certainly not. I have hope for those two guys, but not a good start. Caden Wallace barely played. They thought he could play left tackle. Clearly, he's a right tackle guy. I guess Layden Robinson was okay. He wasn't terrible. Jaheim Bell has some promise. Joe Milton, pretty good. Pretty happy about Joe Milton, but for the most part, you had these major holes in the offensive line. The offensive line got worse. You need new leadership there. And I know Elliott Wolf loves the Packer way. Ron Wolf wrote the book, The Packer Way, and that's Elliott's philosophy. But, I want the Patriot way. That worked out pretty well for about 20 years. Maybe we should go back to that. And I think Mike Vrabel is a sign that we're going back to that. And hopefully with John Stryker, Stretch, and him, and their new scouting philosophy and everything they can do, they can fill those blind spots that Bill Belichick had in the draft in the latter half of his coaching career in New England. And then you have Mike Vrabel, who is probably a top 5 NFL coach. So, I don't know. It just seems like Elliott is becoming less influential, and there wasn't all the lip service to him that we saw right away, which everything I hear, Robert Kraft loves Elliott Wolf and wanted Mike Vrabel to work with him, so it makes sense that he interviewed with Kraft, he came to his press conference, mentioned Elliott a bunch of times, but they've had 6 weeks now for rapport building and see how that front office really plays out. People stop being polite at that point and actually start having serious conversations and building rapport and camaraderie and all those buzzwords, and we don't know how that's played out with Elliott Wolf. This is really the first time we've kind of heard from Mike Vrabel in the last 6 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but sounds like the ball is in Mike Vrabel's court. He is indeed the guy. Finally, Vrabel was asked about Ramondre Stevenson. The Tommy Currans of the world have floated out the idea of the Patriots potentially trading Ramondre Stevenson, and there is a case to be made there. You know, Stevenson has had 2 down years now in a row. He turned the ball over consistently at the beginning, the first half of this past season. Antonio Gibson was the better back for the Patriots, and I'd argue Zeke was a better back the previous year with Ramondre Stevenson. So Vrabel was asked about Ramondre's status, and he said, quote, "We can look back and say, yeah, Ramondre had some issues holding on to the football that year, but we also didn't finish 2 or 3 blocks on the backside that allowed the second guy to come in as he's trying to make somebody miss or he's trying to stiff arm somebody. We've got somebody that's not protecting the guy with the ball, and so it's my job to, one, show them and explain to them that, yeah, Ramondre has a job. He understands that, and trust me, we talked to him about that, but we also have an obligation for the rest of the guys to protect the guy who has the ball, whether that's Drake, Ramondre, Kayshawn, Jalen, Hunter, whoever we throw it to, everybody else has still got a job." Now, when I first read that, I read Hunter and immediately thought of Travis Hunter and got excited, but he's talking about Hunter Henry, obviously. Didn't mention Demario Douglas in there. I'm not taking that the same way I took the Elliott Wolf thing. He's just listing out receivers. Like, he doesn't like Demario Douglas. Like, I think it's a little different, but he doesn't seem to be very warm about the idea of trading Ramondre, which makes sense. I mean, Mike Vrabel, as we saw with Derrick Henry in Tennessee, he loves the power running backs, which Stevenson certainly is. And honestly, Ramondre is a better fit in McDaniel's scheme than the West Coast stuff they've been attempting to run this past year and a couple years ago with Matt Patricia and company. You know, if Alex Van Pelt came back as the offensive coordinator and they were going to run the same offense and do it that way, then yeah, I would be super open about trading Ramondre Stevenson. But as of right now, with Josh McDaniels and how much he uses the power run over the wide zone stuff, it makes sense to have Ramondre on the roster. And you still have Antonio Gibson there as well. I would expect, I talked about how this is a tight end heavy draft. This is also a running back heavy draft. Very good running backs. I think the Patriots will probably dip in at that position somewhere in the middle rounds. I wouldn't be surprised. And it makes sense to have some depth there, especially if Ramondre does seem to be regressing. But I do think he'll have a good comeback year with Josh McDaniels. He's worked with him before. So it will be interesting to see how that ultimately plays out. But NFL Scouting Combine this week. Mike Vrabel on site. We'll hear from Elliott Wolf tomorrow from what I've heard. But going to be a fun and exciting few weeks and months. We got the NFL free agency coming early mid-March. Of course, the NFL draft in late April. Going to be a ton of coverage here on Pat's Cast. You're not going to want to miss it. I mean, the draft stuff is fascinating. The way it's playing out right now. Adam Schefter today coming out saying the Cleveland Browns probably going to prioritize the quarterback position in the top 3. I've seen more and more mock drafts that have both Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders being selected in the top 3, something that I wouldn't have expected a few weeks ago. I think the Giants might be interested in Sanders. I think the Browns might be interested in Ward. And I'd argue the Titans need a quarterback more than either of those two teams. And they're drafting at first overall. Or maybe they really like Will Levis. I don't. So I don't know what they're doing there. But assuming that happens, then you have the choice or you don't have the choice, but you have Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter available at number 4. And from everything I've seen, that guy's not going to be Abdul Carter. It's going to be Travis Hunter. I think Abdul Carter seems to be the favorite to go number 1 overall right now. So going to be fascinating just to see how that plays out. And we're going to have that conversation many, many more times here on Pat's Cast. I mean, if they could get Travis Hunter because he fell in their lap, because 2 quarterbacks were taken ahead of them, and the Titans really, or the Browns really liked Abdul Carter. Like, I would probably rather have Carter than Hunter at this point, but you are getting the Heisman winner, the big splash, the big name player, the jersey sale type player. It's going to cause a ton of buzz in New England. That is the Alex Bregman for the New England Patriots. If they somehow land Travis Hunter, like, you got to take him if he's available, but plenty more on that later. We still have a lot of time for the NFL draft, really 2 months to be exact, so you're not going to want to miss it. Free agency is around the corner. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you very soon with more New England Patriots coverage.
Thought he was done, thought he was gone. 4 long years, but he stayed strong. Mountain air, getting right. High altitude, back in the fight. Bonix hype, nah, that ain't it. Foxborough's where the legend fits. Drake May slinging, McDaniel scheming. Gronk in the zone, man, we're dreaming. Gronk come back one more time. Strap 'em up, let's watch him shine. Red zone beast still breaking free. Gronk spike coming, wait and see. Bruising blocks, hands like steel. Old school power, all out feel. Hunter Henry, double tight. Matchup nightmare every night. Vrabel's call, the Pats stand tall. Gronk's return, hear the echoes call. No whiteout, no regret. He's the best damn weapon yet. Gronk come back one more time. Strap 'em up, let's watch him shine. Red zone beast still breaking free. Gronk spike coming, wait and see. He's healed, he's mean, he's ready to roll. One more run, one more goal. Back where he belongs, no need to roam. Foxborough, baby, it's Gronk's home. Gronk come back one more time. Strap 'em up, let's watch him shine. Legends never